everybody, to the Wine-Centric Show live here in Fenton in Cary, North Carolina. BBQ Bubbly is presented by the Wine-Centric Show, so that's the tie-in. In the Wine-Centric Show, I try and talk with the titans of the wine business, but also just luminaries across the culinary world. And so when we are tying in BBQ and Bubbly and trying to make wine approachable, pairing it with barbecue, we're drinking bubbly and champagne out of a plastic glass, and we're wearing a t-shirt and shorts, you know? Very, very low-key, but still high craft. And that's really what we're about. And when we were putting this together, my wife, Sarah Weiss, and I thought, how do we bring a world-class event to the Triangle of North Carolina? And I've read some of his stuff, and all of the barbecue pitmasters and chefs said, you gotta bring down Mr. Adrian Miller here. So this man is a food writer. He is a former White House staffer. He is a museum exhibitor, and he is the author of 2 James Beard award-winning books, Black Smoke. He is the soul food scholar, ladies and gentlemen, the authority on barbecue and food in America, Mr. Adrian Miller, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, good afternoon. Thanks for being here, part of this masterclass. So thank you, Matt, for that introduction. It's good to be with you. So I'm going to talk about my writing journey real quick and then get into the meat of this Black Smoke book that I wrote. So let me just admit something that's going to immediately lose me all street cred on the subject of soul food. Whoa, we're up. Soul food and barbecue.
Thank you, Serena.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. All right, let me win you back. My parents are from the South. My mom's from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Yeah, you know about Chattanooga? All right. My dad's from Helena, Arkansas. So in the 60s, they separately moved to Denver, met there, and then the rest is history. So even in a place like Denver, they raised me on black food traditions, black church, and all that stuff. So I'm grateful to my parents for a lot of stuff. Went Stanford undergrad, went to Georgetown Law School, practiced law for about 4 years. I hated it. This is not to disparage anybody who's an attorney or you got attorneys in your family. Okay. It got to the point where I was singing spirituals in my office. That's how bad it was. And just to show you how rough law firm life is, when I would start singing, white people would join in. That's how bad it was. So I was going to start a soul food restaurant, but then I got a chance to work in the Clinton White House. Worked on something called the President's Initiative for One America. It was all about, this is a wild idea, bringing us together to just talk to each other and listen, and then realize that we might have a lot more in common than what supposedly divides us, right? Wild. So then after that, I was interested in politics, trying to get back to Denver to start my political career, but the job market was really slow. So I was in DC a lot longer than I expected, watching a lot of daytime television. I'm really embarrassed to tell you the shows that I was watching. Jerry. So in the depth of my depravity, I said, you know, I should read something. So I went to a local bookstore. Let's see if this works. Let me do it this way. Okay. So I went to a local bookstore. I found a book by John Edgerton called Southern Food at Home and on the Road in History. And in that book, he said the tribute to black achievement in American cooking has yet to be written. So that started my writing career. So I've written 4 books now. First book was on the history of soul food. Won a James Beard Award for that one. Second book was on the history of black chefs in the White House. Got nominated for a lot of awards, including an NAACP Image Award. I didn't win, but I got closer to a lifelong goal. I've always wanted to meet Halle Berry. And the year that I was nominated, she was one of the presenters. So this is the progress that I made, y'all. We were in the same building at the same time. Pretty cool. Actually, if you go back and look at the footage of the ceremony, when she was presenting the award, she actually stumbled over her words. And that was the exact moment when our eyes met. And then my third book is Black Smoke, African Americans, United States of Barbecue. That's what I'm going to talk about today. And then my fourth book that just came out is Asian Heritage Presidential Chefs. So while I was writing the Black Chefs in the White House book, I found out about all these people of Asian heritage who have cooked for our presidents. All right. So to the book at hand. So I was working on my soul food book, and I was going to include a chapter on barbecue, but I found so much on barbecue, I said it needs its own treatment. And just right around the same time that I made that discovery, I was watching the Food Network, and there was a commercial for Paula Deen's Southern Barbecue. So I'm watching this show, and 60 minutes later, when the credits are rolling, this is a show on barbecue in the South. Not one African American was on that show. So at first I thought it got it twisted. I thought, well, maybe I was watching Paula Deen's Scandinavian Barbecue. But then I thought, okay, we need to have a book that celebrates African Americans. So that's what really led to this book. So let's see if I can zoom in here. We're going to spend a minute here. So this is from Harper's Weekly, October of 1895. There was something called the Atlanta Exposition, and they had a Georgia barbecue stand. So we would call that an installation today, but they had a live barbecue going. So this is old school barbecue. Dig a pit in the ground, a couple of feet deep, few feet wide, chop some wood, put the wood in there, set it on fire, let it burn down to coals, get whole animals, not always pigs, could be lamb, and also if they had cows, they would quarter them, and then they kind of spread them out, stick poles in them, and then regularly flip them over for even cooking. And then somebody else maintained a separate fire, and they would just walk up and down the trench and the pit and then look for cold spots and put fresh coals there. And then somebody else had a separate vat of basically vinegar with spices, and they would just walk up and down and season the meat. That's old school barbecue, done 4 hours directly over the heat. Remember that, okay? So let's look at this picture. You've got two African-American men who are doing all the heavy lifting here, right? Going clockwise, you've got the guy who's doing the fire pit. He's got a shovel with some coals in it. You've got some spectators just beholding the whole thing. You've got two African-American men who are practicing their instruments because they would be the after barbecue entertainment. You've got another guy at the top with two vats. He's making something called Brunswick stew. Y'all know about Brunswick stew? Okay, for those who don't know, it's basically a chicken and vegetable stew. It's a descendant of a hunter stew. And then you've got this white dude in a top hat who's just pointing at stuff. In this article, he gets all the credit for all of this work. And I thought this was a great example of kind of how, even though the work was heavily dependent on African Americans, white people were getting the credit, all right? So fast forward 100 years, Bon Appetit magazine does an article on who's who in American barbecue. If you can't see that, this scene is basically a picnic scene with all kinds of white people. They've got one woman here and an Asian American in the middle with a beach ball. That's all the diversity. So the question is, like, how do we go from this very black-centered barbecue to the depiction of barbecue that we have now, where essentially you don't have African Americans featured at all in barbecue storytelling? So that's why I wrote Black Smoke. So early on, blackness and barbecue get wedded. So this is a newspaper article from a Vermont newspaper, 1820, and it's called Virginia Barbecue. And in the article, the guy who's writing the article says, if you want a legit barbecue, you have to find a black man to basically build the pit and cook the meat. So that's how barbecue and blackness get really established. And the reason was, old school barbecue was very labor intensive, right? All that stuff I described, building the pit, killing the animals, chopping the woods, enslaved African Americans were the ones doing that work, right? And so that's why legit barbecue was based on blackness. My argument is not everybody agrees with this. I argue in my book that what we call barbecue today is basically Native American in its foundation. And later, Africans and Europeans brought their own meat smoking and cooking traditions that get layered on Native American practices, and then it leads to Southern pit barbecue. Not everybody agrees with me. Those other people are wrong, but I just want you to know there is a difference of opinion. All right, one of my best finds is in a newspaper article. So this woman, there's one article about her in 1840 which says that she was a barbecue superintendent for a barbecue for hundreds of people in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. 1840, a barbecue superintendent is basically what we call a pit master today. So this was an enslaved black woman telling dudes how to make barbecue in 1840. She was so good that she gets hired out to make barbecue, and she makes enough money from being hired out to buy her freedom. So when she dies in 1850, this article is basically an obituary. They treat her as a master chef, talking about barbecue. So that shows you also that sisters have been grilling it for themselves for a long time, as much as we talk about barbecue as dude food. Okay, so basically enslaved African Americans and later their free descendants become barbecue's go-to cooks. So the rest of my book is really just chapters about thematic aspects of barbecue. So one is church barbecue. So let me just admit, writing this book on barbecue was a distraction to my own spiritual journey, because whenever I read the Bible now and I come across the words burnt offering, I think about barbecue. And then the story of Moses and the burning bush, like I wonder, did it smell like hickory or oak? You know, okay, I know I have problems. So I write a whole bunch about barbecues, because what we find is like during slavery, Sundays and weekends were the time when enslaved people got time off, and they had enough leisure time to do old school barbecue. So it became a point of building community, spirituality, and other things. So you see a deep connection that extends even into the 20th century and 21st century. And then the next chapter talks about what I call barbecue freelancers. So you have these people who were previously enslaved who have this very specialized barbecue knowledge. After the Civil War, they get put on trains, steamships, Wagons, all kind of places to go bring authentic Southern barbecue. So one example is this guy, Columbus B. Hill. I know you probably can't see him because of the light. Sorry, didn't know what the conditions were going to be. But he's a guy that shows up in Denver in the 1870s. He cooks a big barbecue in 1890 in Denver, and this was what was on the menu. Beef, buffalo, possum, bear, mutton, elk, antelope, and sheep. Seriously eclectic menu. So what happens is he's making this barbecue for 3,000. It was a VIP barbecue, but word got out in Denver, and 30,000 people showed up for this barbecue for 3,000. So they were clamoring because they're smelling all this good food, right? So somebody said, hey, maybe if we just gave out free beer, that would chill people out. Well, a barbecue riot ensued. And you can't see this here, but basically the next day's newspaper has a full illustration of the riot going on. My favorite part of it is in the corner of it, they have this guy serenely eating his barbecue sandwich while all this havoc is being wreaked around him. I thought it was great. So one of the things is I found through my research, I found Columbus B. Hills is his name. I found his unmarked grave in a Denver cemetery. And so I raised money and I had a headstone created for him. We had a final going home ceremony for him last fall. Yeah, thank you. All right, and then I talk about barbecue business. So a lot of these people, if they didn't stay in a place, you know, they just kind of floated around. But some people put down roots in places and kick-started that community's barbecue scene. So Henry Perry is a guy who shows up in Kansas City in 1905. He is credited for kick-starting Kansas City barbecue and training a lot of the greats that would come afterwards. I mean, he was selling possum and coon and all kinds of stuff in his early barbecue restaurant. Another woman is Ernestine Vanderval, who was another woman who created a barbecue place in Nicodemus, Kansas. If you know anything about the Exodusters who left the South in the 1870s and settled the Middle West, so she started a barbecue restaurant there. So I wanted to show again, women were definitely entrepreneurs in this setting. Let's see, we'll skip that. I do a whole chapter on barbecue sauce because there's this heresy going around that barbecue should be unsauced. And I think, I'm gonna go out on a limb, I think most African Americans would say, says who? Because in a lot of African American barbecue joints, the sauce is what distinguishes you. Because it's just understood that you know how to cook the meat. You should know how to cook the meat. But the sauce is what does it. In fact, there are black-run barbecue restaurants that just sell the sauce with bread as an item on the menu, all right? So this is a editorial cartoon from a famous barbecue guy in Kansas City named Arthur Bryant. If you've ever been to Kansas City, it's one of his famous places. He dies in 1982, and so the local newspaper had this editorial cartoon where he shows up at the heavenly gates, the pearly gates, and St. Peter has one question: did you bring sauce? And then I wrote a chapter about competition barbecue. So today, competition barbecue is big business. You have to have thousands of dollars and a lot of leisure time to really make it on the circuit. But in the early days of the barbecue circuit, African Americans dominated because it was low barrier to entry. Usually it was a small entry fee and it wasn't a big to-do deal. So you've probably heard of the Memphis in May competition. So a woman named Bessie May Cathay, she actually won the first competition in 1978. And all she did was she showed up with a pickup truck and a portable grill and won the whole thing. So a lot of people don't know about her. So I tell a little bit about that. I think the reason why you don't see as many people on the competition circuit today is because it's so expensive. In fact, the big competitions like Memphis in May, the American Royal, the Houston Rodeo, those will probably stay around because they have a lot of competition or a lot of corporate support. But the smaller contests, right now, they're having trouble even fielding enough teams to have a contest. Like especially post-COVID, you've just seen a real drop. So I don't know how much longer competition barbecue is going to really dominate the American barbecue scene. Okay, this woman is named Sylvie Curry. She's an African-American woman who is probably the most decorated competitor on the barbecue circuit. She's based in Los Angeles. She does all of this stuff by herself, which is pretty impressive. So I write about her, and she actually gave me one of her recipes. So now here's the question. Why is barbecue so popular right now? And I think the reason right now is because of people like me, foodies, right? I'm one of those guys who goes to a restaurant, I take a picture of my food. I'm one of those dudes, okay? And we're the problem. So basically in the late 80s, early 90s, you start to get these people who are really interested in food. They have disposable income and they're willing to travel. And they're asking two questions. What's barbecue? And where do I get the good stuff? And so they're relying on people like me and food television and magazines to give them an idea to curate where to go. And unfortunately, at that critical moment, the magazines, instead of being diverse, they focus pretty much on white dudes. And I argue there are really four archetypal white dudes that they focused on. The first is the Bubba, right? The rural guy from the South, overalls, the ball cap, making good barbecue. Then you've got the competition cooks. These are the people with the syringes, the Bluetooths, all kinds of science to cook stuff. Then you got the hipsters, right? The people with tattoos, piercings, chic jeans, all of that kind of stuff, right? Interesting hair. And then you've got the fine dining chefs. So fine dining restaurants would have barbecue on the menu, but it would be a seasonal thing, right? They might have it just during the summer. But right now I can tell you, fine dining chefs feel like they have to show their chops by being able to make barbecue. In fact, you have a lot of fine dining chefs who are actually opening up just barbecue-only restaurants, because that's how significant barbecue has come in the past few years. So now, remember what I showed you in that old school barbecue portrait, right? Directly over the coals, whole animal cooking for several hours. Now, if you ask people what barbecue is, they'll tell you it's low and slow, which means cooking at a low temperature away from the heat source. Now, that is not really barbecue. That's smoking. But because Texas barbecue is so popular and they're doing smoking, people have now said that that's barbecue. Now, I value my life, so I'm not going to roll up into Texas and say, y'all aren't barbecuing, right? But they're really smoking, but now we've conflated that. In the same like in the 90s, doing hamburgers and hot dogs in the backyard, people call that barbecue. It got conflated, all right? The second thing is that it's using the lesser cuts of meat. That is a reflection of the 20th century and urbanization. So when people start moving to the cities, doing whole animal cooking becomes more of a challenge. So people started focusing on smaller cuts of meat. All you cooks here know that when you break something down, it's a lot easier to cook than a whole animal, right? It's a lot easier to cook a chicken thigh than a whole chicken. The same thing is going on with whole hog and whole animal cooking, right? And then also immigrants. So like for instance, in North Carolina, the western part of the state, instead of being whole hogs, it's more pork shoulder. That's a reflection of the German immigrants that arrived in western North Carolina in the 1920s. Same thing's happening in central Texas, where you get these mid-European butchers having meat shops. They've got unsold meat and they decide to smoke it and sell it to the workers in the field or in the ranch hands, right? That starts the Texas barbecue tradition. Then there's also this idea that barbecue should be minimally seasoned, just salt and pepper. I know a lot of people that do marinades and have their spice rubs, so they're gonna say, what are you talking about? That's a high chef's, like a high culture chef's sensibility, and then also no sauce. So when I started this book, just looking at the trends, I was actually worried about the future of black barbecue. I'm no longer feeling that way. I just think it's shifted. The way that black barbecue was celebrated in restaurant culture and other things, that may be slowing down, slightly dying, but barbecue is showing up in other ways. You still have the brother or the sister on the side of the road in parking lots doing their thing. You still have some restaurants, but now you have a lot of people that are trying to just like do food trucks and other things. So I just think the scene has shifted. Okay, so that's it. Let me just give some other reflections. When I wrote my book on barbecue, I went to 200 barbecue restaurants around the country, because somebody's got to do it, right? Somebody's got to do the research. And so I would say this: there's a lot of mediocre barbecue out there. Maybe you all feel that. And maybe we're at the point of peak barbecue. I'm not sure. But I will say that there's still some gems around the country. But there are three trends that I'm really noticing right now. One is you're seeing more competition people open up restaurants. They have the trophies there. You're seeing more fine dining chefs get in there. And then you're also seeing a lot of fusion. So taking American barbecue and fusing it with other global food traditions. Like you're seeing a lot of Asian barbecue, Latino barbecue. And then also you're seeing a lot of vegetarian barbecue. So I don't know if you've seen this, but yeah. So there's people like doing jackfruit, and then also taking roots like burdock and lotus root, cutting it to look like a rib tip. You okay, brother? All right. Cutting it to look like a rib tip and smoking it, and then putting sauce on it. So I just think it's really, really interesting. So threw a lot at you in a short period of time, but let's just go ahead and just ask questions and be happy to do it. I'll start here and then I'll go here. Okay, so question is anything I would raise up about North Carolina in particular. So I'm one of the few people that actually loves North Carolina barbecue, especially Eastern. I love the whole hog, like what you got at Sam Jones out here. I cannot tell you how much hate North Carolina barbecue gets around the country, and I feel it's because it's not being made the right way. See, what's happening across the country is people are cooking their barbecue all the same way, and then they're dousing vinegar on it and saying it's North Carolina style. That's not the way you make North Carolina barbecue, right? You're adding that throughout the whole process, and it gives it a depth of flavor. So there's a lot of haterade about North Carolina barbecue, but I love Eastern. I mean, Western's fine, but I really love the whole hog. And I think it's, artistry, because to cook a whole hog, you've got different cuts, cooking at different temperatures and times and stuff. I think it's impressive. Now, here's the interesting thing. Even people in Texas now recognize that. So in places like Texas now, they're starting to feature whole hog barbecue. So it's not just North Carolina and Western Tennessee anymore. It's popping up in a lot of other places. So I think that's cool. Yep, and then here. No, Hawaiian, luau barbecue, I've never had that. Not legit. I've had it in restaurants, and I don't think I'm getting the legit thing. So I don't know if I have to go to Hawaii to get it, but you've had it? No, you haven't had it? Okay. So here's the thing. From what I'm told, the luau barbecue of Hawaii is not really smoky because the meat is protected by a layer of leaves and stuff. So it's a little bit different than what we would consider a barbecue in America, because we're used to having that kind of smoky taste, right? But I've not had it yet, and I'm on a quest. This is a little morbid, but I know that at some point in my life that I will have it, because my oldest brother, he has instructed me that instead of having a funeral, he wants me to have him cremated and take his ashes to Hawaii and give it to a surfer dude to just spread in the ocean. So when that happens, I will go have my luau then. So the question is, she's a Kansas City native, and so she's looking at competition barbecue and realizing that people are trying to placate the judges. So here's what's going on in competition barbecue. Regardless of where you are, people are imitating whoever wins, right? So if somebody wins, everybody starts doing the same thing. So believe it or not, there's a lot of homogenous barbecue in the competition circuit. It's good, but a lot of it just takes the same. So a lot of it is kind of random. And it's just like minute differences that might make the difference between you coming into first or 10th place. But because the judges are all expecting things, there's actually a disincentive to be different, right? Because you could hit a home run or you could be horrible. So people are always trying to hedge their bets. So I think that's unfortunate in competition barbecue. But I forgot to tell this. Let me just tell you how quickly I became a barbecue judge. So 2004, I'm working on my soul food book. I know that I'm going to do a barbecue book. I'm reading the local newspaper, and there was an ad that said, "Come become a barbecue judge." And I was like, okay, I should know that, because I thought they were going to teach me how to make barbecue and all that kind of stuff. So I go there to the Adams County Fairgrounds. There's about 70 people in the room. I walk in. I'm the only dude under 250, But that was fine, because I saw my future, and I was like, okay, that's right. So what they do is, in Kansas City barbecue, they have 4 categories: brisket, pork, which is really pork shoulder, pork spare ribs, and chicken. And it's judged on a 9-point scale for 3 categories: taste, texture, and appearance. So what they do, and then they all have arbitrary rules. So in the Kansas City Barbecue Society, and as an example, you can only present your barbecue on these greens: green leaf lettuce, flat leaf parsley, and cilantro. So if you made the best barbecue in the world and you presented it on collard greens, disqualified, okay? And then they bring out stuff to make sure you get a hang of it, and if you don't, they would just say, "Hey, Adrian, you should have noticed this," whatever. And then after that, you stand up and you take a barbecue oath. It is a sacred thing, and I'm not going to repeat it because I can tell some of you are going to make fun of it, like this gentleman right here. And then a few weeks later, you get your badge in the mail. And at that point, you can go judge any contest authorized by the Kansas City Barbecue Society. So here's the weird thing. Barbecue is so popular now that to get a judging spot is like hitting the lottery. So I was judge number 2,675 in 2004. They now have over 20,000 judges who are eligible, right? So basically, I only do celebrity judging now, because you got to sit at your computer right when they announce the openings, and if you make it, you get in. If not, you're just out of luck. So, and I think this is a reflection of all the barbecue shows, like Barbecue Pitmasters and all of that. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay, so 3 tips to determine what is a good barbecue spot and what is not. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a head fake, because there was 3 tips to discern a good barbecue place. So this is a head fake because this is no longer true. So one is just to smell the wood burning when you go there. But most barbecue restaurants have switched to gas, and say that they know that cats like me are looking to smell the wood, so they just burn some wood just to fake the funk, right? So isn't that messed up? Yeah. Another one, this is kind of a joke, is to see if there are flies hanging out on the screen door before you go in the restaurant. Because if there are no flies, then they're telling you something, right? No, I'm just kidding. All right. So the things that I look for is, I love a place that has a regional menu. So if I'm in North Carolina, I want to see some North Carolina type barbecue. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be good, but just that. And then the other touch tone is for barbecue ribs. That's my thing. It should not be falling off the bone. If barbecue ribs are falling off the bone, that means it's overcooked. It can still taste good, but it's overcooked. So look, if you're a guy who that's your thing, be you, right? Just don't be it around me, but I'm just telling you. So when you eat a barbecue rib, you should bite down. When you pull away, there should be slight resistance from the meat, but it should break away cleanly, and then the exposed bone should turn white. So that is cooked rib. And then the other thing is, when I roll up into a barbecue joint, especially if it's busy, I just look in the cars in the parking lot. If there's all kinds of cars ranging from like a Beamer to a low-end used car, you know, it's like a place that's welcoming to a lot of people. So that's probably telling me that's a lot of great barbecue. So those are the kind of things I look on. But other than that, you just got to bite into it. I will tell you this. Texas is just taking over everywhere. Because of the success of Aaron Franklin and the Texas barbecue shows and all that kind of stuff, you're now seeing places in the South, new places open up, and they're basically Central Texas barbecue. So I have mixed feelings about that because I want to celebrate the regional styles, and I hope more people would celebrate the regional styles, but that's what's happening right now. So it's kind of messed up, but those things happen. But thank you for coming and hearing a little bit about barbecue.